Welcome to the Scrum Professionals Meetup. And tonight's topic is estimation. Um, if I had to point to one aspect of this complex work that we do that has perhaps caused more pain and suffering than any other, it would have to be this. It would have to be estimation. How many of you, just by show of hands, have suffered pain because of estimates or estimation? How many of you would say, oh, yeah, right? Oh, look at that. Just about every hand went up. And that's kind of important to notice, because when we have a problem like this that seems to be universal, right? Almost everybody seems to struggle with it. That's a good indicator that what's going on here isn't one of those situations where some people are bad at that. Those people need to get better. Now, when it's this universal, there's some sort of fundamental systemic issue at play. And with estimates and estimation, at least the way it's kind of traditionally been done, I would say that's absolutely the case. Because the traditional approaches to this really have been trying to use the wrong approach to solve the wrong problem. No wonder it's not going well, right? So let's unpack that statement I just made, using the wrong approaches to try to solve the wrong problem. So I'm going to start with the first part, wrong approach. The traditional way of going about this is time guessing. Right? We run around, we ask everybody, hey, how long will this take? How long will this take? How long will this take? That's not going to serve us very well for a variety of reasons. So first off, human beings are demonstrably, provably bad at guessing magnitude, right? Guessing amount, guessing how much. And it really kind of doesn't matter what sort of dimension we're trying to guess magnitude for. It could be height, weight, distance, time. Right? How many jelly beans are in that jelly bean jar? We're bad at that. We're bad at guessing amount or magnitude. And then it turns out that in the time dimension, we're even worse than we are in all the other dimensions, right? We, very, very poor accuracy, right? Our guesses are all over the place. And even worse, they tend to skew low. So there's this known cognitive bias called planning bias. And planning bias leads people to always believe that things will take less time than they really do. In fact, there's one of these cute named laws, like Murphy's Law or whatever. For this one, it's called Hofstadter's Law. Kind of like it. Because Hofstadter's Law says everything will take longer than you think it will, even if you factor in Hofstadter's Law. I like that because it's like kind of self-referential, maybe even properly tail recursive, I'm not sure. But it's really true, right? We're bad in the quality of our guesses with time guesses is bad, and they skew low. So, all right, well, what's better? Turns out comparison is much better, because while our brains are very bad at guessing how much, our brains are actually very good at looking at two things and saying that one's more. Whether it's height, weight, distance, how many jelly beans are in the jelly bean jar, right? Or amount of work, right? We're good at saying, oh, that tree is taller than that tree, right? That building is farther away than this building. This jelly bean jar has more jelly beans than that jelly bean jar. This feature will take longer to implement than that feature, right? We're better at guessing relative, like this is more than that. And more than that, not only are we pretty good at saying this is more, that's less, we're pretty good at saying, well, how much more, so long as it's a ratio, right? Is it twice as much, 3 times as much, 5 times as much? We do pretty well. And one of the things I forgot to bring up when I was talking about, time is, as I mentioned, we're provably, demonstrably bad at guessing how long things will take. And that's even for simple things. right? Like, oh, how long will it take me to, complete my shopping trip to the grocery store? The same one that I do pretty much every week. Our guess is going to be bad and we're going to tend to underestimate. So even for simple things, but for the kind of work that we all do, right, which is complex work, then it's really hopeless because with complex work, we're in the domain of unknown unknowns, meaning the work that you're going to have to do to, say, implement a software feature or do some other sort of complex work, we can't know what all the work is in advance, right? By a show of hands, how many of you have the following happen on a regular basis? You've got something that you or your team is going to do. You've got a plan, and everybody looks at it and says, yeah, that's a good plan. And so we start the work. And then, like halfway through, all this unanticipated work has shown up. How many of you have that happen on a regular basis? Yeah, this is the nature of complex work. And I'm kind of referring here to the Cynefin framework when I talk about complex work. And so in the complex domain, right, where we have unknown unknowns, time guessing is really hopeless, right? Because we don't even know what all the work is. So coming back to comparison, it turns out comparison holds up reasonably well, like as well as anything possibly could, even if we don't know what all the work is, right? Because we can say, oh, the business wants this feature, the business wants this feature. Which one's more work? Well, knowing what we do know, this one seems to be more. Oh, how much more as a ratio? Well, knowing what we do know appears to be about twice as much. And that ratio is going to hold up way better than if we asked, hey, how long will this take? How long will that take? Right? So the ratio thinking is kind of key. It's using a part of our brain that just works a whole lot better than the part of our brain that guesses time. So all of this has been exploring the first part of my initial statement, right? That statement was, we've been using the wrong approaches to try and solve the wrong problem. So all of this has been wrong approaches, right? Historically, we've used time guessing. We would do way better if we did comparison, right? This is more work than that. How much more work? Oh, about twice as much work. But all of that is really just the first part of my original statement, right? Wrong approaches. The second part, I think, is more important, trying to solve the wrong problem. How many of you have heard statements like this in your workplaces? We need better estimates around here. We need to get better at estimating around here. We need to get some better estimates. How many people have ever heard that? Anybody? Oh, yeah, just about everybody. Yeah, it turns out, no, you don't. You don't need better estimates. It's the wrong problem to solve, right? What the business needs is good predictability. And predictability is the answer to the question, what are we going to get and when are we going to get it? That's predictability. Now, estimates are just a tool that we use to get to predictability, but the estimates themselves aren't the point, right? But I think because we've been so bad at time guessing and estimating, right, we've gotten ourselves really wrapped around the axle of like, oh my goodness, somehow we have to figure out how to get better at this. And it turns out you can get really good predictability with a body of estimates that have a lot of variance, right? If you looked at each, task or each feature or whatever you wanted to call it, each story, and compared like the estimate, to other things that had the same estimate and compared that to like, well, how much actual time did it take? Boy, you can see they were all over the place. But that's okay. Because the story point approach, right, the relative story point approach, is based on tracking the rate of delivery as an average. So let's think about this, right? If my team typically finishes, 100 story points worth of work every sprint, right? Oh, some sprints it's more, some sprints it's less, but on average it's 100. Well, to get that number, we had to measure, right? The team estimated some stuff, then we did some work, and we just tracked, right? Oh, how much stuff gets done on average every sprint. And this is kind of the secret, because the predictability here is part guess component, right? We're guessing the estimates, right? But at least now they're relative estimates. So they're going to be higher quality. Oh, and by the way, they're not going to tend high or low, right? It's ultimately going to be an average. But then to get the predictability, we have to measure, right? And that measurement is an average. We just know on average how many points worth of stuff gets done, say, every sprint. So it's guess component plus measured component actually gives us very good predictability on average. Because we don't actually need to know exactly how long will each deliverable take. We need to know the average rate of delivery. So that way we can give our stakeholders guidance like, oh, this feature set most likely is going to be ready November 1st. And, we can even look and see, well, how much does our rate of delivery bounce around? And then based on that, we can even give them guidance about, well, how much might that prediction slide forward or back, right? So we'd say, yeah, that feature set probably ready November 1st. There is some chance it may slip as late as mid-November. And there is some chance it may be ready as early as mid-October, but most likely November 1st. And that's super useful, right? Because then our stakeholders can go back to their domains and make decisions appropriately, right? That's useful for them. That's very useful for them. Contrast that with what we used to do, right? The way we used to get predictability looked something like this. We have some big deliverable the business wants. So then we do like a work breakdown structure and try to find all the pieces of work. But we're doing complex work, which means we're not going to be able to find them all, but we find the ones we can. Then we run around and we ask people, how long will this take? How long will this take? How long will this take? And we're going to get a bunch of guesses that are very noisy and tend low. And then we take all those guesses and line them up maybe with a Gantt chart so we can see the critical path, right? That's a useful tool. And then that was the schedule. We just took a bunch of guesses on an incomplete body of work and just added them all up. And we said, there we go. That's the schedule. That was our predictability, right? That's absolutely a recipe to have the project run late, right? Because we don't have all the work in the list because you can't find all the work because it's a complex domain. And the guesses we know are skewing low. Guess what? You're not going to hit your date, right? Things are going to run long. So, all right, relative estimates better. We can get way better predictability. It all sounds good in theory. There is a bit of a bootstrapping problem. How do you get started? Right? And, the technique you're going to learn tonight was taught to me by the late, great Steve Bachman. And we've kind of evolved and modified it over the years, but really, right, he was the one that taught me all of this kind of predictability stuff. Several of you out there know him. We recently lost him. So tonight's a bit of a homage to Steve. So getting started with relative estimation. The trap looks like this, right? As a Scrum Master, I get the team all, oh yeah, we're gonna do relative estimates, it's better. We'll sit down for our first estimating session. We say, okay, team, here's our first story. Everybody hold up a number. How many points is it? And somebody on the team's like, well, what's a story point? Scrum Master's like, oh, it's a relative unit of work. The team member's like, relative to what? Scrum Master says, well, all the other bits of work. Well, we haven't estimated those yet. It's a bootstrapping problem. I hate that, right? So we need some way to overcome that. And all too often what I would see happen in the past was some smart, well-meaning engineer would say, hold on, I've got it. What if? What if a story point? It's kind of like a day. Oh, good, now we can estimate. No, bad, we just went right back to guessing time, right? We're just using a new word. Right? What's the estimate on this? Oh, that's about 2 days worth of work. Oh, I mean story points. If we just change the word, but we don't change the way we're thinking about it, we can't really expect dramatically better results. And so the technique that you're about to learn, as I said, evolved out of one that Steve Bachman created. This one's called Easy Estimation with Story Points. And it's my absolute favorite right now, both for getting a team up and running with their story point scale, but also for ongoing estimating. And so the best way to learn it is to try it out. So first thing I want you to do is I am going to drop a link to a Google document in the chat, and I'm going to ask you to click into there. So this is the tool that we're going to use. Looks like this. So your first assignment, once you get into the document, is to simply get each person's name in this column that says developers. So for my little demo team, there's going to be Chris and the other Chris and Chris with a K and yet another Chris. And then maybe that's it. Maybe there's just 4 people in my little demo team. And so that's all we need. Welcome back, everybody. Looks like everybody's settled into their spreadsheets. All right. So the background for this one is a little bit of a homage to the crazy .com boom. Some of you look maybe old enough to remember it, and some of you not so much. How many people remember the .com boom, like the mid to late 90s? Oh, wow, more people than I would have expected. Heady times, my friends, because if you could spell business plan in PowerPoint, and your company name started with an I or an E and it ended in .com, you could get venture capital. All the venture capital. Oh my goodness. And so some crazy, crazy business ideas got funded back in the day. And we are going to be one of those crazy .com businesses. Everybody, congratulations. You have been hired into our new startup, weeatfruit.com. Woohoo! You're all getting stock options and the whole bit. So we think we're going to get rich eating fruit. I know it sounds ridiculous, but trust me, even crazier things got funded back in the day. So you and your colleagues on your breakout room team are a fruit eating team. And the work that you do will be to eat fruit. And you're about to hold a backlog refinement session. Season, I think that went to the main room. So we're about to hold a backlog refinement session, and you have a number of items that are requested from your stakeholders. Each one is a single piece of fruit. So it might be a single cherry or a single banana. And the work that your team is going to do is to eat that piece of fruit. So now the fruit has been picked from whatever plant it grows on, but no other prep work has occurred. So any preparatory work that has to happen to get the fruit ready to eat, you have to do it. Then you have to eat all of the normally consumed parts of the fruit, so you don't have to eat the pit of the cherry or the peel of the banana. And then once the fruit has been consumed, you have to clean up your workspace and return it to its original pristine state. We're not going to leave any technical debt behind. So if you used a tool like a knife, you have to wash the knife and dry it and put it away. If you have any parts of the fruit left over, like the peel of the banana or the pit of the cherry, you have to go put those in the compost and so on. So that is the work. Like I say, each one is one piece of fruit. So now let me demo how this is going to work. So I work at our spin-off company, We Eat Veggies. And so, all of the work, I'm going to be estimating are vegetables, but all of the work you'll be estimating is fruit. Now, for this technique, before you do it the first time, you have to get together with the team and identify a reference work item. And the reference work item should be something that everybody on the team feels like they understand. It should be something that the team could do, right? Some, a story or a deliverable of some sort that the team could potentially, work on. But it should be a trivial amount of work, like so small that the team members are complaining that we're even bothering to talk about it. They're saying things like, oh, it's going to take longer to talk about it than to just do it. That is an excellent reference item, right? And so we simply declare that reference item is one story point worth of work. So here on my estimation sheet, in the set right next to the number 1, for my team, a single P, is our reference item. And so we're just declaring that, the amount of work to eat a single P, we're going to declare that to have a value of 1 story point. So here on the estimation sheet, we have this section over here. I like to call it the estimating grid. There are these rows where we'll put items to give them estimates. Each row has a label. So this is the row where we'll put any and all items that we think are trivial amount of work. And then as you go up, right, the numbers multiply, meaning anything that's twice as much work as a P goes here in the 2 row. Anything that's 3 times as much work as a P will go here. Anything that's 89 times as much work as a P, I'll put here. Anything that's 46,368 times more work than a P goes here. And the sequence we're using is the Fibonacci sequence. Every number is the previous 2 added together. And the spreadsheet goes pretty high, but if you really feel like it doesn't go high enough, that's okay. Just grab the last number, drag it down. The sequence goes infinitely high. I'm sure at some point Google spreadsheets would give up on the numbers, but I think it'll go just as high as you need it to go. So given that we have a reference number, we can start the technique. So the person whose name is at the top will go first. So we go in order, we take turns. The very first person doesn't have a super interesting turn. The first person, all they can do is click on the first item. So that's right over here. And we're only going to be working with the items here in the item column. Just ignore the new items. Maybe we'll bring them in a future iteration, but for now, pretend they're not there. So we're going to reveal the first item. We do that by clicking into the cell and then coming up here to the fill color tool. It's this thing looks like a paint bucket being dumped out. Click on that and choose reset. That will reveal the item. And then whoever it is that's taking that first turn, you get to drag it onto the estimating grid wherever you think it goes. And by the way, drag and drop in Google Sheets is you click into the cell to highlight it and then hover over the top of the cell to get the little mitt, and then you can drag it. So let's see. Carrot compared to P, carrot is bigger. There's more to eat. We have to scrub it or scrape it. We have to cut off the greens at the top and maybe even the little root at the bottom. So I think it's significantly more work than a P. I don't know, 8 times more. Actually, I think more like 13 times more. So I'm going to drop it there. So that's Chris's turn. And so now we move on. The next person on the team gets a turn. And from here on out, when it's your turn, things get more interesting because you have a choice. If you agree with where your teammates placed items, well, then go ahead and grab a new item, an item from the items column, and drop it into the estimating grid wherever you think it goes. If, however, you disagree with one of the estimates your teammates have made, then you could use your turn to move one item to a different location. So when it's your turn, you can either place an item or move an item, one or the other of those, but not both. So in this case, other Chris says, carrot, 13 times more work than a pea. I can live with that. So I want to bring in something new. So I go to fill color, choose reset. Green bean. So green bean is less work than carrot, more work than pea. I would say it's a little closer to pea than to carrot. So I'm going to place it here. So on and so forth. Team members taking turns, perhaps choosing to add items that haven't been estimated. Ooh, artichoke. Oh my goodness. Okay, so artichoke, these can be really big and they're really complex, right? Because we've got multiple parts we need to eat. There's the artichoke heart, right? We want to cook that and then eat that. But then there's also the leaves, right? We want to cook those, but then, when I eat those, I always want to have dip. I like a nice garlic dip or maybe a dill dip. So we're going to have to make the dip. So this is by far the most work that we've seen. I think maybe 377 times more work than a single pea. So then yet another Chris gets their turn and they say, well, I agree artichoke is, a lot of work. And I agree that I prefer to eat the leaves with the dip. But if we're just trying to get this work done, I think as a team we could probably get by without the dip, right? We'll all just get in there, we'll eat the leaves. I think we can save the time of making the dip. I don't think we need it. That might be a little gold plating, as they say. And so I'm going to move this down a little bit. because I think we could do it without the dip. When you get to the end, just wrap around, the first person gets another turn and continue through the items column. Don't break into the new items. And if you happen to think that there's something that's the same amount of work as something else, that's great, right? Maybe I think Brussels sprout is the same amount of work as carrot. No problem, just put it into the same row. So you can have multiple things in a single row. Each of those items will have the estimate of, in this case, 13. Bit of advice. When it's your turn, do what I was doing. Think out loud. Explain your thought process to your teammates. And, engage in conversation and discussion with your teammates. The better you all get to a shared understanding, the better the estimates will be. However, you don't need to get to consensus. When it is your turn, it really is your turn. You get to move that item wherever you think it best goes, even if other people aren't on board with you. But it will serve you best to discuss it. Any questions before I send you off to try this? Oh, and I see we got some stuff in the chat. The bacon vegetable. Oh goodness, yes. I had a friend for health reasons decided to try being vegan for 3 months, but they declared bacon to be a raw vegetable when they did that. So I can relate. Any other questions before I send you off to try it? Yes. And help me with pronunciation again.
It's Anuradha. It's just Anu. I was not able to edit my name, so I just left it at that. It's Anu. But when we are trying to edit it, right? When we're trying to, let's say I'm not okay with whatever the previous person moved and I want to move it, are we going to have a conversation about it, or are we just going to keep going?
I would say both. So have the conversation, but don't feel like you have to wait till the conversation is fully resolved to move it. So some of the conversations may be ongoing over several turns, and that's okay.
Right. So the agenda is to get all the fruits into the estimated columns.
If you can in the time that we've got. You may not get them all in there, and that's okay.
Okay. Thank you.
As many as you can. Tammy, and then Jose.
Quick question. So the item that is in the column 1 will always be smaller than everything else that we're going to uncover.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's when you anchor your scale as a team. Part of the art of this is picking a really trivial reference item. And when we come back after you've tried the technique, if people are interested, I can talk about like, what do we do if later on we find out there's even smaller things? Turns out there's a pretty easy answer, but yeah. Jose, and then Kara, and then Suruchi, and then Ron. Oh my goodness. All right.
Mine was similar to Tammy. Just making sure for clarity that we're just labeling it per size, not for eating or preparing, right?
No. So the work that you're doing is to eat that piece of fruit. Okay. So the work is going to be to prepare the fruit, eat the fruit, and then clean up after eating the fruit.
Okay, so the assumption should be that the pea has already been cleaned and taken out from the pod, right? That's why we're starting with the smallest one. The pea is already ready to eat, whether it's frozen or.
Now imagine it's just been pulled off the plant. So maybe it's still in the pod, actually. Right? In our case, I think the reference item is a single blueberry. I think for all the teams, because you're all on the fruit teams. So yeah, you've got a single blueberry. It's been picked, but no other prep work has been done on it.
Okay, so assumption is that we're going to clean it. We're going to, at least here in the States, take out all the pesticides, etc.
Yeah, exactly. Ron.
Yeah. So I was gonna ask so you've now said that blueberry is one, but do we then all look at all of the things ahead of time in order to pick blueberry as our, if we didn't have you facilitating, you told us we as a team would normally be picking that item. How do we all look at everything before we?
What I typically do when I do this with a real team is in advance, we will identify a couple of really trivial items. right? And pick one that we all seem to have like a strong feeling like, yeah, that's the most trivial. So we identify that one in advance typically. This is how I've been doing it. Now there's the team estimation game, right, which was Steve's original game, which would find that item for us the first time we did it. And I found over time that like identifying that item ahead of time seems to help the whole process go a little bit smoother. But both can work. Both absolutely can work. Suruchi.
Yes. So are we expected each developer to estimate each fruit? For example, first fruit is strawberry. So, and we have 6 developers. So do we want every developer to estimate the time that will be required to consume one strawberry?
Just whoever uncovers the strawberry. And as they're estimating it, certainly they can consult with the rest of the team. And if after they've placed it, some other team member thinks, the estimate is wrong, that other team member could use their turn to move it. And so that way, over time, things that there are differences of opinion will surface and discussions will happen. So when it's your turn, you're just estimating whichever one you uncover, or you could use your turn to move one existing item to a different location.
I just wanted to clarify when we were talking about P's, we're talking about the smallest ease, like of completion, and not smallest size physically.
Right.
Because I think there is some confusion there. It's not physically the smallest size, it's the smallest amount of work.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. All right. And Jun Long.
I assume I posted questions in the chat there, but I assume based on what you explained, this activity is kind of like combine the initial estimation and the refinement session together.
Yes.
Okay, got you. Okay.
Both happening simultaneously. Yeah. Yep. All right. I think we might be ready. So I'm going to dial up 8.5 minutes. You'll have 8 minutes on the main countdown timer and then 30 seconds on that little final pop-up that should show up this time. And as always, if you need help, click the request help button and Season or I will jump in and help you out. Otherwise, have fun with this. And when you come back, I'm going to be very interested to hear what was going on. What did you notice? What was your team talking about? What was happening as you were using this technique?
Not doing it.
So I love it. I love it. So let's talk about that. So one of the things that happened was we encountered some work that the team wasn't at all familiar with. So I'm curious. I heard one team, like just in the moment, they did a web search for it. Other teams, other teams that may have encountered something that you weren't familiar with. How was that handled?
Yeah, the person doing the estimating did the very quick Google search in the moment, and then we basically aired on for safety because there was a lot of uncertainty, and we threw it up into the higher numbers.
Oh, I love that. And there's something that Joseph said there that I really want to call out. He said, well, because of the uncertainty, right, we increased the estimate. This really gets to something really interesting. When I teach people this technique, I just tell them, oh, if it's more work, you give it one of the big numbers. If it's less work, one of the smaller numbers. And that's all the instruction I get. What I've learned is that what people actually do is more interesting and intricate than that. But I've learned I don't have to teach it to them. They'll naturally do it without even realizing they're doing it. Without realizing they're doing it, most people will take into account 3 different dimensions when they're estimating effort or work. So the first dimension is, in fact, effort. How much stuff do we think we're going to have to do? The second dimension is complexity. Ooh, how tricky is the stuff that we're going to have to do? And then the third dimension is risk and unknown. right? How much of what we're going to have to do are we fully confident that we totally understand it? There's not going to be any surprises versus, ooh, right? How vulnerable are we to surprise here, right? So maybe if we're not familiar with durian, we're like, oh, boy, there could be some surprises there. We better increase our estimate. So I love that. What else did people notice that was going on? If you would help me out with the little Zoom electronic hand raise, it makes it a little easier to keep track of who wants to talk. Michael, what was going on with your group?
I was just saying that whether you overestimate or underestimate it depends on the system, because sometimes it could overestimating would have greater consequence than underestimating, and sometimes the other way around.
And what's interesting about this approach is that since we're not estimating directly in time, we're not saying, oh, this is 3 minutes and 5 minutes or 8 hours and 13 hours. It's just, oh, this is twice as much work as a blueberry, 5 times as much work as a blueberry, et cetera. That whether we tend to over or underestimate, that actually kind of goes away in the wash, because the way we get to predictability is as items are being completed, we add the points for those items to our velocity, right? Velocity is simply, oh, how many points worth of stuff got done in a given time period, usually a sprint. So that might be 1 week or maybe 2 weeks, depending on your team. And so that rate of delivery, it's data, it's measured data, as opposed to traditional estimates, right, which are guesses. And then you're right? People tend to underestimate or overestimate. Most of us underestimate. And as you called out, wow, very often underestimating has far worse consequences than overestimating, right? Because if we deliver a little early, rarely does that cause the business model to fail. But if we miss the big, trade,
but it can.
It could. It could.
You don't know what you're dealing with there.
Yeah, it could. It could. Yeah, the more common failure mode is, oh, everything's taking longer. But yeah, you're right. Either way can bite us. And the nice thing about the kind of story points and velocity is it is an average. So over time, it's neither high nor low, which is kind of cool. Kara.
I was going to say it depended a lot on the strategy that the pointer was using. So I think it was Christine pointed out, like, hey, are we just biting into the apple or are we cutting the apple apart? Well, that changes the resources you need. It changes how long a process is going to take. It changes if an orange becomes easier or harder. So the strategy each of us used changed the factors.
Yeah, and this really gets to something that I think is super important, which is that when teams are using this technique, I find that what they end up doing is talking about, hey, how are we actually going to do this? And they also end up talking about, wait, what is this request anyway? Right? So they end up getting deeper understanding about what are we being asked to do, right? What's the deliverable? What do the stakeholders really need here? And they start to have those conversations about how should we do this work? And I'm curious, in that 8 minutes, how many of you learned like a new way to prepare or eat a fruit? How many people learned something new about fruit in that 8 minutes, just by show of hands? We learned something new, maybe a different way to eat fruit or prepare it. Wow, I would say 25% at least, maybe higher there. And this is fruit. You've been eating fruit your whole life, right? So imagine the discovery and knowledge sharing that's happening when a group of, engineers, developers, highly technical people get together and talk about the work, right? We're going to discover that, oh, somebody on the team has a different approach to doing this work and it's better or more efficient or whatever. And we're going to find a better way to implement it. And there's this knowledge sharing that happens that I think is super valuable. So I love that comment. I love that one. What else? What else did people notice was happening? Oh, Michael.
We talked about the unknown. It seems like you could add another dimension to this, is assuredness, and also variability. It's pretty obvious. There's only one way to really eat a blueberry, but the grape could be in a bunch. Maybe it's not. Maybe the apple is sliced. Maybe it's not. Yeah, how sure you are of the result could be another dimension of this, or the potential complexity.
Yeah, Yeah, nice. Nice. Ahmed.
I felt as we went through the list, it sounded like things were how do I say, the estimation, the gap between them grew bigger. So when you're comparing a coconut to a pineapple, they did put it on the same one, but in my head it felt like the gap was growing bigger, like one is bigger than the other. So I feel like as we go through the list, it changes.
Yeah, and I often find that as teams are doing this, because all of the items that we've previously given estimates are visible and can be changed, I find that people like have new ideas or new thoughts, or sometimes something comes up in a conversation when we're talking about, orange, and everybody suddenly realizes that, oh yeah, that also applies to something else, tangerine or something, right? And so suddenly we revisit that one because we realize there's a similarity and we're going to have to do the same step. So yeah, I like that, right? As new information arises, it's easier to change, right? One of the anti-patterns with traditional approaches is all too often estimating is kind of like you get a one shot at it and then that's it, right? That's the estimate, right? We're not going to change it. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Karen.
Yeah, everybody just naturally jumped in and tried to help everyone else. I'm not a developer, so that is what I saw.
Yeah, and I like that, right? If you get everybody in the room and talking together about the work, right? We tend to naturally fill in each other's blind spots. It's one of the things that makes teams so powerful, right? Is yes, we have these experts and they all are, maybe an expert in a particular area of the work, but I don't care how brilliant you are, you have your blind spots. And so other members of the team, right, by being there and being in the conversation, are going to fill in the gaps. And as a team, right, we're gonna find a better way. We're gonna miss less things. Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, not knowing didn't impede anybody. They were just gonna go for it,
Yeah, and knowing that your team members can catch you if you get it wrong, right? Like if I give Durian an estimate of 2, good chance one of my teammates is going to say, oh, hold on a minute, I know a little bit about Durian, and here's why maybe it should be higher than that. And I love that. I love it. Jose, what did you know?
At least the thing that I was getting mostly about this is that once you kind of understand the varying experience level of each person, especially now with cooking and prepping. For me, what I want to take out of this is that in the future, when I am working with developers or we're trying to decipher the story points for each one, is that even though I cook a lot, so I was varying it on my experience of how I would prepare, what are the steps that I normally do, but then again, I need to consider the person or the people in my team who don't have that experience, as you were saying, the expertise level. Not that I'm an expert at that, but knowing a little bit more, I think I want to go with my default that you were saying when we don't know, to make it bigger, so that kind of like the helping and allowing that person to feel comfortable speaking out, that they may not know how to do it as much as those who have been there longer, but enough time for that the person who is doing that task is able to do it at their experience. And for our stakeholders, we may over shoot it in terms of the size, but it's better to finish it faster than to misjudge it and then prolong it.
Yeah, and one of the things that kind of brings up for me is that these estimates that we're creating are team estimates. And if you look at any piece of work, right, maybe there's a member of the team that's kind of really good in that area. And, when they look at the piece of work, they might say, oh yeah, that's pretty easy for me. I would say that could be a 3. And maybe the rest of the team is like, ooh, but what if you're not available when we have to do that, right? What if you're on vacation, or what if you're busy on some other high priority thing, and one of the, other people have to do it? Ooh. Now, there's not a right or wrong answer here, But what's important is that the estimate that the team comes up with ultimately is a number that the whole team is comfortable with, right? So maybe the rest of the team says, you know what, yeah, almost certainly when it's time to do that pomegranate, you'll be available, you'll do it, so sure, 3 is fine. Or maybe the team says, you know what, there's some chance you won't be available and other people will have to do the pomegranate. So, let's bump that up to a 5 or an 8 since it's a team estimate. And again, not a right or wrong answer. It's just as long as the team is comfortable with that, that will serve us well, because velocity isn't an individual construct. It really is a team construct. It's something to help us plan, what can this team get done over time? So yeah, great observation. Thank you. Thank you. Tammy.
What I found interesting is, yeah, we're supposed to be eating the fruit, but when we got to the coconut, it was like, okay, well, are we just going to cut it in half and just eat the meat? Or are we just going to cut off the top and then we'll drink the milk, then cut it open and eat the meat? So that was a really interesting conversation, because it made me think like, you need to get everybody's perspective, because automatically we're thinking, oh, we're just going to eat the meat. But there's other steps that may be involved where you have to do something else first and not assume that that's what it's going to be, right?
Yeah. And one of the things I love about these conversations, this is one of the reasons why I really like doing this work in, say, a weekly backlog refinement session where we have the whole team there and the stakeholders who are relevant for the particular items that we're refining that week, because then we have a better chance of getting clarification on some of that stuff, right? It's like, oh, are you expecting us to just eat the meat, or do we have to, drink the liquid? Or goodness, is this a young coconut, or what's a coconut that's not young? Is it elderly? I'm not sure. But anyway, so we have the opportunity to get that clarification, and sometimes we can't get that clarification in the moment, and so it's very common for and one of the outputs from a backlog refinement session being some research work that we're going to do outside of that, refinement session, right? So during the sprint, we might have some backlog refinement tasks, right? So maybe, gosh, our team doesn't know a lot about durian, so we gave it a big estimate for now, but we've created a little research task, and a couple of team members are going to go off and spend a little bit of time learning more, and then come back and report to the team about it. So nice. Philip.
First off, I call a coconut that's not young me. So, but second off, one of the things that I found the most interesting is we kind of all decided that a durian, the actual effort it takes to clean and get durian was very similar to a coconut, but the estimation was much higher because nobody wants to do the work because it smells bad. That's I think that's real. There's some real world examples of that too.
Oh.
So I just point that out.
Love it. A Philip coconut. Suruchi, what do you got?
Yes, I do have something to share about coconut itself. We got coconut. One of the dev team member estimated a little bit lesser, but then the other developer immediately changed it. It's like if we come across overpowering, and if someone, I mean, if we couldn't get the consensus on that, then can you share your experience and guidance? How can we handle that? And at that time, maybe I would like to handle it as a Scrum Master and not a developer. I will not be a developer, but if someone does like this, yeah.
Oh, I love that. So I think the question you're asking is, imagine I'm a Scrum Master facilitating this, and I've got two developers. They're going back and forth on the same item, right? They're like, it's a 55. No, it's a 21. No, it's a 55. No, it's a 21, right? That sort of a situation? Yeah, okay.
No, actually what happened, the thing happened like this. One estimated just 13, and the second person immediately estimated 144, and the first person couldn't even revert back. It might be he was not able to even because of that superpowering, but overall there is a lack of consensus.
Yeah. So what I find in general, when you have that like disagreement going on, right? And items moving, generally it'll end up moving back and forth over time, right? Because one person will give it the higher estimate, and then when the next person's turn comes back around, they'll move it back down. As the person facilitating the exercise, I've learned to just let that go for a while. And here's why. My experience is that
let what go?
just let that back and forth disagreement continue for a while. Like, don't try to resolve it too quickly. And the reason is, what I found will happen is, now this will surprise you, but people in general, and perhaps developers even more so, like to be right. And so, when somebody else moves their thing to a different number, when they get their turn, they're going to want to explain why they're right and that other person's wrong. And what will happen is they'll bring more information to bear. And what I find is the disagreement usually revolves around, there is some information that not everybody knows. Maybe the person who keeps like moving it up to a higher number knows some complicating issues that the rest of us may not really be aware of yet. Or perhaps the person who keeps moving it down to a lower number knows a better, easier way to do it. And so if I let them argue it out for a while, usually eventually the information surfaces, and with the help of other members of the team who will start leaning one way or another, it almost always resolves, almost always. In the very rare instances where I've encountered it where it just keeps going back and forth and not resolving, I will occasionally offer the observation that if we go with the low number and we're wrong, and I'm going to put that in finger quotes because estimates are not supposed to be accurate. If you could be accurate, we would call it measurement and we wouldn't have to do any of this guessing business, right? So we only estimate when we don't know the right number. But anyway, if we go with a small number and it's wrong, right? It takes way more work than we thought. That usually causes more trouble than if we go with the big number and discover we're wrong and that piece of work actually got done sooner. And as Michael called out earlier, well, maybe not always, but the vast majority of the time, right? The consequences for being off. We said it was bigger and it took less time, usually less problematic. And so occasionally I've encouraged the team to go with the bigger number. But honestly, I rarely do that because I found if I just let them go, they will resolve it. And the other thing that I find helpful to share with the team is our goal here is not to get numbers that are right. It's impossible for the numbers to be right? That's why we're estimating, because we can't know the right number. Our goal here is to get numbers that we're all comfortable with, right? We all think that's a reasonable number for that, right? That will serve us well. So nice.
Got it. Thank you, Chris.
You are welcome. All right, two more. Joseph.
Yeah, I was just going to add to the last topic. When I'm facilitating those discussions, I'll usually time box the debate so it doesn't eat up the entirety of the refinement session. I will, as Chris, as you said, I will often try to defer to the larger number, but I'll also toss out the idea that this might be a time for a spike.
Yep. And a real good approach to that is to combine the two. Say, hey, there seems to be a lot of uncertainty here. How about if for right now we go with the big number, but we're going to create this research task, often called a research spike, where we're going to go off and do some work to learn more. And then guess what? Next week at our next refinement session, we get to resume the conversation, but informed by the information we learned from doing that research. Yeah, I like that a lot. Tammy. Oh, you were muted.
Sorry about that. So I know for the purpose of this exercise, we had to cover up all the items. And so it seemed like, with us each taking a turn, that it made us take more time for this exercise. But in real life, the items would be visible And so the developers would be already knowing and looking at them. So wouldn't you go as a team through each one and discuss it as a team, as opposed to, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
I find that this approach seems to actually go faster and surface the important conversations, because I find that pretty quickly lots of items will just settle in and there's not a lot of like contention around them. But then the few that really need it get that time. Whereas I find if we kind of go through each item as a whole team and what do you think? What do you think? And I just find it seems to take longer. It's just been my experience, right? And your mileage may vary depending on the people you work with. So, with all of these tools, I think trying different approaches and finding out like, oh, well, what works best with the people you're working with is always the right answer. But yeah, my experience has been, I found this approach seems to be a little more efficient. But yeah, your mileage may vary.
Thank you.
All right. So let's imagine this. You had your first backlog refinement session. You created some estimates. You identified some areas of unknown, right? Perhaps your team wasn't very familiar with Durian. And so you created one of these research tasks, one of these research spikes. And so over the, a team member spent a few hours over the course of this sprint doing a little bit of research about Durian. And before the next session, they shared their results with the rest of the team. So let's have a look at the report that they created for us.
Now it's time to see what's hot in my inbox this week. I've had an email from Lisa in Southend-on-Sea. She writes, "Dear John, I'm a big fan of exotic fruit. I'd like to order in a weekly supply of durian fruit, but I'm worried because I've heard that it's really smelly. Is this true?" Well, Lisa, let's find out.
The durian is a Southeast Asian delicacy, even though it's said to smell like rotting flesh. But just how smelly is it? First, we have to establish a control smell. Earlier today, this brainiac held his head inside a box containing 3 of the smelliest things we could think of. Stale vomit, a rotten egg, and a sweaty shoe, with dog mess on it. We wanted to see how long he could last before he could no longer handle the evil stenches. The answer, 22 seconds. Now we're going to find out how smelly the durian really is by seeing how long the brainiac can last with his head inside a box containing the reeking fruit. You dig? There you go, Lisa from Southend-on-Sea. The brainiac only lasted for 8 seconds.
Proving that durian fruit smells 3 times worse than a concoction of stale vomit, rotten eggs and dog muck. If I were you, I'd go for a papaya or kumquat.
Right, so we've got a little bit more information. And so now I'm going to send you back to your breakout rooms for just a short session, not quite as long as the first one. I want you to just get a sense of what is it like to be able to return to your body of estimated work and bring in some new items and have the opportunity to adjust estimates that you've made in the past. So let me demo this really quick. So, your sheet looks probably something like this. You might have a couple of items that didn't get estimated. That's okay. So when it's your turn, you could either move an existing item or bring in an item that hasn't been estimated yet, including any of the new items. So perhaps I just watched a video about bitter melon, and it turns out they're bigger and more bitter than I expected. And so I'm going to use my turn to move this up a notch. I think maybe it's a little more work than we thought. And then other Chris gets their turn and they say, I'm okay with the rest of this. So I'm going to reveal one of the new items. Oh, a tomato, or is it tomato? I think this is kind of similar to carrot and Brussels sprout, so I'll put it there. So on and so forth, right? When it's your turn, you could move an item to a different location, or you could bring in an item that was not previously estimated. Oh, goodness. I'm going to move it up here because of the spice factor. Yeah. so on and so forth. I'll give you 5 minutes for this one. Well, 5.5 with the 30-second final warning. Any questions before I send you off?
Mushrooms are fruits also.
Oh yeah, they're fungus, right? Yeah, yeah. Oh. What do you call a mushroom that walks into the bar and buys everybody a drink? A fungi to be with.
Oh,
With that, I am sending you
Let's
off.
go to the breakout room.
Go into the breakout rooms. And welcome back. Welcome back. So I am curious, what did you notice when you got to return to your estimates and change them and add new things? What was it like getting to come back to that body of estimates?
We were having a knockdown, drag out fight over durian.
Oh, the durian.
Well, I said just do it. Get in there and get stinky. We can do it.
I said I want to be upwind by 2 miles, and that's going to take me a while.
Yeah, there are songs about the durian. Other observations. Anu.
It has nothing to do with estimates, but then working with people, it was fascinating to know how each of us think about the fruit. Me coming from a tropical environment, for me, cutting a coconut is very easy. And we are used to peeling the orange and putting it in our mouth. So how that kind of, people look at it in different ways was like, wow, mind-blowing. Okay, just for a fruit, if it is like this, then I can understand how it's going to be estimating complex work, right? So that was just one brilliant observation that I made.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Thanks for sharing that. And it does.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
We had the experience of having guests that like to eat lemons right off the tree without peeling them. They'd eat the rind and the lemon and loved it.
Oh my goodness.
There are easier ways to do things if you choose to do it that way.
People are surprising, aren't they? What else did you notice?
I felt it was easier, like there was a better flow than the first session.
I often find that over time, right, if a team uses this technique, say once a week, we get together for a backlog refinement session, the team tends to get faster and faster and faster, right? And I think part of it is, we get used to how to do it and what to talk about. I also think part of it is, though, having all the context in front of you of the items that we have previously estimated. I think it really helps people to look at the new piece of work and say, this is kind of like orange and tangerine, so I think it should go here, right? And the rest of the team be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So nice. Tammy.
I basically was going to say that, and then you said it. It seemed like everything flowed better because we knew what to anticipate, what was required. So it just seemed to go a lot smoother.
Oh, nice. Nice. Thank you. Karen.
People from different cultures have different skill sets. Like if you put me and Anu, together preparing, a pineapple, I'd still be thinking about it and she'd be having some pineapple. So, there's different things that different people bring. Yeah, from different cultures, different, certifications, but culture is when they can think differently, right? And behave differently, which is a, benefit.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. One of the things that we get, like I say, it's the power of the team is that, our differences, help each other out, right? The fact that we have these different perspectives, these different experiences, makes us stronger. Absolutely. Jose.
Yeah, a little bit about what Karen was saying, and also at least this is the first time that we work together, so we're also understanding how each person thinks and speaks and giving the respect of it, and how, as you build the team and you start learning about each one and building that rapport and relationship, we're able to now not question each other, rather help out in the way that it's not at least done at the beginning. So it was interesting to see what each perspective brought.
Nice. Nice. Very nice. Oh, goodness. So, any final comments, observations, or we bring this in for a landing?
One thing, Chris, is, I really like the approach. I think it's, very, very useful, not only in the technical field, but in other fields, in other aspects of business, in working with teams. So, I'm going to find this very valuable. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Very welcome. Joseph.
Yeah, just the one thing that when we were doing our sorting that we didn't consider is the size of the knife that you're going to have to use for the pineapple and the coconut and the incumbent risk there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, nice. Nice. So yeah, risk absolutely factors in, right? Ro.
I want to ask Chris, how much preparation we need to give this team? Are we going to have a separate session before start doing by each user story or whatever the items? They give an idea about the items, or what is the preparation we do?
This is a great question. So here's my guidance and recommendation. Let's imagine that your team is holding, say, a weekly backlog refinement session, maybe 1 hour a week. Ideally, your product owner would identify ahead of time, at least several days ahead of time, oh, these are the items I'd really like us to, focus on refining this week. Make sure they, can invite the stakeholders that are relevant to those items and send that list out to the team as early as they can. So the team members have time to do, bits of research and have those kind of back and forth conversations with each other. So that really helps it go smoothly. The other thing I will say is that because we recognize that risk and unknown factors in to what the estimate is, it is actually perfectly reasonable to bring something in at the last minute. And even if we only talk about it for 30 seconds or a minute, we can give it a number. It might be a very big number for now because there's so much we don't know. But we can estimate anything even if we don't know very much about it. Now, what we might do is say, well, goodness, we have no idea what a durian is. We're going to give it a very big number for now, and then we're going to do the research and come back next week and, refine that based on what we have. So is that helpful? Or am I speaking to the right thing?
Yeah, correct. But do you think that having a separate session is helpful? Like this estimate before come to this estimation session, having a separate session with the stakeholders or the project business owner to explain about the items. Is it required?
You could. I find that it actually tends to be more effective to just do it all together in that backlog refinement session. And perhaps a reason for that, or maybe many reasons, but perhaps one reason is I find that when the developers know that, hey, we're making estimates, they're paying more attention, they're more engaged, right? Whereas if we say, oh, we're going to have some time with the stakeholder and they're going to talk about what they want and we're just going to listen, maybe the team members might be more likely to be a little bit more passive. But if you tell them, hey, we're trying to put a number on this, I don't know, just naturally it seems like it draws them in more. They want to have deeper conversations about really understanding what the request is and really like, how are we going to go about it? So you could do it, right? Absolutely, that way. My personal preference, for whatever that's worth, is to just have those conversations there in that backlog refinement session while we're doing the estimating. No, but
thank you.
I don't think there's a one true way here.
Thank you,
Michael.
Sorry, a couple things came to mind. First of all, the numbers, the sequence. I'm pretty sure that's put in the sequence just to make them a little bit more meaningless, so that they're not considered. You can't tell if they were not right there. You couldn't tell really which were sequentially. Is that right?
Actually, no. So yeah, let me explain. No, there is no time. Let me sum up. That was a Princess Bride reference. Anyway, yeah, let me explain. So the sequence is the Fibonacci sequence. Every number is the previous two numbers added together, right? So 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, so on and so forth. Now, what's cool about the sequence, and I think what makes it work really well for estimating, is that the sequence converges very quickly, actually, to the golden ratio. Every number is golden ratio bigger than the previous number. And the convergence gets pretty good as early as 3, right? Below that, it's pretty rough, right? 1 to 2 is a double, 2 to 3 is 50% more. But once you get like 3 to 5, ooh, we're really getting into that 1.6 ... That is the golden ratio. And, you know, this golden ratio seems to show up all the time in nature. Gosh, I don't know that we know why. But one of the things that seems to be true about it is it seems to be, how much bigger does something have to be, especially something that's kind of amorphous, we can't just hold a ruler up to it. How much bigger does it have to be before you can reliably get a group of people to agree that it's bigger? And it seems to be if it's golden ratio bigger, you're not going to get much argument. People say, oh yeah, that's bigger. And so basically each number is kind of like the next bucket bigger, right? Because each number is golden ratio more than the previous number. And so the specific numbers aren't what matter, right? It doesn't really matter that carrot's a 13 and mushrooms a 21 and 30 and jalapenos a 34. What matters is that mushroom is 1 hop bigger than carrot and jalapeno is 2 hops bigger than carrot. It's that relationship that matters, not the specific numbers. And this loops us back to something that I actually said earlier I was going to revisit. Sometimes when I'm working with a new team and I get them to make their, help them make their initial estimates, sometimes the thing that they think is like the smallest, most ridiculous piece of work imaginable, later on when they get good at story splitting, they realize, oh no, actually work could be even much smaller than that, right? Oh, now our 1 isn't small enough. That's actually not a problem, because what you can do is you can take your whole scale and just drag it up. So what I just did not change the relationship between any of the estimates.
Oh,
right?
yes, it sure did. Because now the difference between pea and green bean is how many points there? It's a lot more than it was before.
But the ratio.
3 more units. Now it's quite a bit more.
Yeah, but the ratio stayed constant, and it's the ratio that matters. So it's not the absolute number. It's the relationship between the numbers that matters.
Okay.
Remember, we're not doing.
But your velocity was based on the earlier set of numbers.
So yeah, if you do this after a team has a velocity, you have to go back and recalculate their velocity based on basically doing the same motion with the stuff that, all the previous estimates.
You have to keep the ratios. You have to keep the velocity, the relationship of the velocities rather than the actual velocity.
That's a way of thinking about it, yeah. And so sometimes when I'm working with a new team, right after they've made their, first pass, I'll have this whole Fibonacci golden ratio talk with them and get them to the point where they're nodding their head and saying, oh yeah, it's the ratio that matters. It's not the numbers that matter. And in that very first session, I'll go ahead and do this shift. I'll say, you know what? Just to give us some extra room on the bottom end of the scale, let's just do this, right? And by doing that, even in the very first session with a team, it does 2 things. One, it gets us out of the 1, 2, 3, where the approximation of golden ratio isn't quite as good. And it builds us some space at the bottom of our scale, should we need it in the future. Whereas if we're using the true Fibonacci sequence, which is what I recommend, you'll never run out of numbers at the big end, right? There's an infinite number of big numbers.
Question, the second half of the question is, rather than do it as we did with you revealing 1 at a time, wouldn't it make more sense to first put them in order of effort, which should be fairly straightforward, and second, then put spaces in between in the gaps between ones that are harder?
You can absolutely do it that way. And in fact, in the spreadsheet you were working in, right, there's like 3 links at the bottom. It says easy estimation is based on the team estimation game by Steve Bachman. So easy estimation is the technique that you all just learned and practiced. Team estimation is where it came from. We kind of evolved it out of that. And that technique does exactly what you just described. First, you line everything up with no numbers, right? This is less than that. This is more than that. And then you lay the numbers over the top. So you absolutely can do that as a bootstrapping step.
And the gaps anytime there's more than 1.26 times more effort.
Say that one more time.
Insert a gap anytime there's more than 1.26 times effort or golden ratio of effort.
Essentially, yes. Yeah, essentially, yes. Yeah, you just put the next number above that. Yes, exactly. As probably most of you know, because you're all members of Scrum Professionals, pretty much every Monday we hold open office hours. I love it. Brought to you by weeatfruit.com. So just about every Monday at 3 o'clock Pacific time, we hold a free open office hour. Just, register on the Meetup and drop in and hang out with us. Great place to get a question answered or discuss a topic of interest with a group of fellow Agilists. We've got kind of a core group that hangs out pretty often, and then an ever-rotating cast of people who will show up, like seeking answers. So come hang out with us. That's a great time. All right. Well, without further ado, thank you all for hanging out. I hope this has been valuable for you. I've really enjoyed it. And if at any point in the future you're like, wait, how did that estimation technique work again? weeatfruit.com. Take you right to it. Good night, everybody.